So I'm on day 2 of the cord treatment. The grand total that I ended up treating yesterday was 7 lambs and 3 ewes. So now I just treated 1 lamb and 1 ewe, so now I've got to go catch the rest of them. Okay, so I did just get done with the second day of the 5-day treatment. They're not very happy with me, but nobody has shown signs of polio yet, which initially start as animals not going to eat feed. Usually they're off by themselves in the corner, and when you approach them, they're slow to get up, especially if they have like an off behavior. If it's a normally an animal that's scared of you and it tolerates you walking up to it, that usually starts to show that there's a problem. Another symptom is stargazing, which is when they literally like look up at the sky. So none of these guys are showing those symptoms, and I did check on them multiple times last night, and I will check on them again today. So next I'm going to start doing the chicken identification, because there are some people that are more interested in the chicken aspect, I think mainly because they have chickens. And I did find a weird abscess on one of my lambs underneath the right rear leg, so I did take a picture of it and send it to my vet just to see what she thinks it might be, but I'll also put a picture on here. Okay, so I'll start with my young group just because they're enclosed and it might be easier to get some examples here. So when you first start identifying chickens, or if you get like a mystery batch from a hatchery and you're trying to figure out what types they are, you can't really rely on the feather colors that they have when you first get them, because they lose all that down and it changes colors. So like they can drastically change from when they're chicks to what they'll be when they're adults. So around 6 to 8 weeks you can pretty much guess what they will be. And usually the first thing that I start with is by looking at their comb. So that can be a deciding factor. There are exceptions to every rule, of course, but there are a few different types of combs. So you have a single comb, which is the stereotypical chicken, which you think of like this leghorn right here is going to have a straight comb. This rooster right here is a perfect example. He's got one straight comb. Then there's another variety called pea comb, and I'm trying to find, like, the Easter eggers usually have pea combs. So if you look at this one right here, that's going to end up being a pea comb, so it basically like bumps up on their head and it doesn't really extend like the single comb does. This one over here, this I think is a rooster. I believe it's going to be a Wyandotte, a silver lace Wyandotte, I think. Actually, this is a perfect example. So I just said that Wyandottes have rose combs. So if you look at his comb, it just sits almost flat on the top of his head. And his is a really good example. I think he's the only adult Wyandotte that I have that would actually like show this really well. So his comb is significantly different than most of the other chickens that I own, which have most of them single combs. So these chickens underneath this shrub, of course, now that I'm talking, they're not doing it, but they are dusting. So this is how the roots get dug up of my trees. So normally, like, people that actually like their landscape, this is why they don't free range chickens, because they will just dust in anything that they can find. So once the ground dries out, this is what I can usually find them doing during the summer. They're usually hanging out underneath the shrubs. I've got a group under that shrub. Of course, it doesn't look like any of them are dusting. These guys are actively dusting. So I'm going to ask another question on the next page. And I don't know if anybody noticed, but some of my older chickens do have the bands on their legs. So it's not because they're show chickens, but when the vet tech from the state came to test out the chickens for to get NPIP and AI certified so that I could sell eggs, which is avian influenza and the national polarium something, I don't know, but they take blood and they test the birds, and then they take a swab from their mouth, and when they do that, they put these bands on the legs so that they can be identified if any of them come back positive. So these older chickens here, you can see that they have those bands. My rooster, my black rooster, of course he's not in here, sometimes his will like hit on his spur and it'll sound like he's like an old western cowboy with literally spurs on his feet. I think my black rooster is an Australorp. It's hard for me to tell the difference between the Australorps and the Jersey Giants because they're very similar. Jersey Giants are larger, but when you only have one rooster and nothing else to compare it to, it's really challenging. So another thing on the legs that help to determine what the heritage of a chicken is are feathers. So like this one over here, the bearded duckle, has heavily feathered legs and feet. It extends like all the way down to the toes. And I have some black copper morans and blue copper morans. And these girls, this one's got a metal band on her leg. But if you look close at these two darker chickens over here, you will see some feathering lightly on their legs. So that, like when I'm hatching my eggs or I have people that buy the eggs and ask me what they get, that's one of the characteristics that I look for because I have a rooster. He's a black copper morans. And another tool that you can use to help identify chicken breeds if you're not 100% sure of what you have is their legs. So depending on the breed of the chicken, their legs will be different colors. This one over here is a red comet. She has yellow legs. The barred rocks usually have yellow legs. The Easter eggers are usually green or a grayish color depending on what their heritage is, because usually Easter egger is a mix of a bunch of different breeds. This one over here I'll draw your attention to. So last year I got on this kick where I kept hatching out eggs at Pioneer, and I had a student that would take the chickens if I didn't want them. So my husband did let me keep a few of them. Ha ha ha. Because he doesn't anymore, usually. I get one order of chicks a year, and that's all I'm allowed. But this one here is a white chicken, and it has grayish black legs. So this was a cross out of a couple of the chickens, a rooster and a hen that I had. I'm guessing by the look of it, it's probably a Lavender Orpington. What I was really looking for were my Easter eggers, because they're the only adult pea comb chickens that I have. But this is another example. This is a silky. So I've already shown you pictures of him, but this is just considered a silky comb. Theirs just kind of sits on the top of his head, and you can see his a lot better than you can see my silky hen. Oh, he's hiding now. But it really just kind of sits there on the top. A lot different than the single comb chickens that I have. Also keep in mind, I think I've mentioned this before, but hens have smaller combs than roosters. And I made another mistake. There actually is one Easter egger in the chicken coop right now. So this is an Easter egger right here, the one that's standing up. She's not super friendly. She has a pea comb, so it's really small. It's sitting on the top of the head, and it doesn't really extend far up like the single combs do. And the roosters look very similar to that, except just larger. So another thing that I haven't discussed yet, but you see some of the chickens, if you look at through my other videos, you'll probably see that some are missing the feathers on their back. Does anybody know what causes that? So the last thing I was going to show you was the extra toes on the silky. Of course, by the time I got around to it, the rooster had wandered away, and the hen, of course, for whatever reason, doesn't have an extra. Again, I just got done cleaning out the meat chick pen. If you look at these guys over in the corner, this is a perfect example of why I'm not putting them outside yet. You see how bare that skin is there? They're growing exponentially quickly, and their feathers can't keep up with it. So eventually their feathers will catch up. But this is why I can't put them outside when it's so cold out or we have a threat of snow, because they're outside, they have some cover, but it's not like they have nice warm shavings like they have in here, and they're out in the open. Again, they have a windbreak, but it's just not a great situation. So they'll probably stay in here for another week or so. I really would like to get them outside before they end up going to process. One thing, if you don't have me on Facebook, which my students don't have me on Facebook, one thing that has just absolutely exploded is buying local and knowing where your food comes from. Number 3 for the coccidiosis treatment is done.